and what it takes to make your images look stunning with black and white. Hello and welcome to Luminar Coffee Break. I'm Angela Andrieux, and today I want to share with you my 3 favorite tools in Luminar AI for creating spectacular black and white photographs. Let's get started. So I've got a gorgeous image up on the screen here from one of our ambassadors, and as a color image, it's beautiful, but I think because of all of the wonderful contrast, the clouds, the reflections, this also would make an amazing black and white. So let me show you how I'm going to do it. First, I'm going to start by doing a little bit of Enhance AI. I do this to just about every image, and that's just going to open up some of those shadows, bring out a little bit of contrast. It is affecting the colors, but since we're going to go monochrome, that's not going to be a big deal. Hello, Joseph. Glad you're able to be here today. And hello to everyone else who's watching. If you have questions as we're going along, make sure you pop them into the chat, and I'll do my best to get those answered for you live. All right, so we've done a little bit of Enhance AI. Now let's go down to our black and white tool and convert this to a black and white. Now in converting to black and white, this is not one of my favorite tools. It's a necessary tool. There's 3 others that I want to show you, but we're going to start here with the black and white tool. And the initial black and white conversion to me looks a little bit flat. So to start, we're going to use these luminance sliders, which impact the different color areas that were in the image. So if we turn this off and we look at the image, we've got a lot of blue, and we have some green and some yellow. A lot of what we perceive here in the grass and in a lot of foliage is going to be actually yellow, not so much green, but our brains kind of think of it as green. But when we're looking at these sliders, we'll see that the yellow actually makes a big difference. So we'll start with those blues and cyans. I'm going to go ahead and move those down to the left, and we're darkening those up. That's going to create some additional contrast in the sky. Look how beautiful that makes that sky. And then we're going to use those yellow and green sliders to pop up a little bit of detail here in the contrast of the foliage. All right, so now we've made our initial black and white conversion. Here's where we started. Here's where we've gotten so far. So as we go through and really craft our black and white image to bring out all of those stunning contrasts and tonal ranges between our blacks and our whites, the first thing I want to do is go to structure. And this boosts mid-tone clarity. It gives the perception of detail. And in an image like this, it really does beautiful things. So you can see if I start to pull that up a little too high, it gets what I like to call crunchy and looks a little bit overcooked. So I want to keep this at a relatively modest level. I think at about 30 looks good. Let's turn that off and back on again. And you can see that's added a little bit of crispness and definition to the image. Next, I want to go down to our super contrast tool, which is under the professional section. And this is where we can work independently with our highlights, midtones, and shadows. So I'm going to bring up my highlights contrast fairly high. And you can see how that's affecting a lot of the edges of the clouds here with the lights hitting the clouds. We can then adjust the balance to bring back even additional detail in those clouds. I'm going to pull that up to the right pretty high. And then I might back off the amount a little bit. All right, and let's do the same with our midtones. Let's pull that up relatively high. And then adjust this midtones balance back and forth. I'm actually going to pull this a little bit to the left, and you'll see that's opening up some of these shadows. But in doing so, we also flattened a little bit of the contrast. That's where we're going to make up for it with our shadows contrast. We're going to pull this up again pretty high and move this shadows contrast around. You'll notice as I pull it to the left, the image gets more flat. And if I pull it a little bit to the right, we start getting some of those richer black tones in there. And I think that looks really beautiful. So probably right about there. Let's take a look at what super contrast did. So before, kind of flat, and after. The details are getting so much more rich. Now I'm going to go back up to the top here to my light tool and do a little bit of fine tuning here with our smart contrast, our highlights and shadows, and our blacks and whites sliders. As I'm going through and doing this, I want to hit the J key on my keyboard, and this is going to show my clipping warnings. Everywhere that's marked in red, I'm losing detail in my highlights, and everywhere that's marked in blue, I'm losing detail in my shadows. It's not necessarily a horrible thing, but if those areas are interesting and add to your story, you want to make sure you have as much detail as possible. So I want to address a little bit here of those clipped highlights and make sure we have detail in those edges of the clouds. So I'm going to pull back on my highlights a little bit. And I'm also going to back off that white point a little. And we're not going to get them all back, but we are going to get back a lot of that detail. You want to make sure you don't go too far because then you start to get, again, that flat looking sky. So right about there, and then we can actually brighten back up those white points. There we go. And actually pull that a little bit to the right. And now we have just a few little spots that are bright white. So we have everything in that tonal range from pure white all the way through that spectrum. Now let's take a look at our shadows. I'm going to disable that clipping warning here for just a second and take a look at the areas right along this berm and up the path that are now getting some pure black areas. That really doesn't bother me too much. In fact, I think if we got rid of those, we're really going to lose the definition and start to make this look flat. So if we wake up those shadows to bring back some of that detail, it actually makes our image not look nearly as compelling. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on that to reset it. Maybe pull it up just a tiny, tiny bit to bring back some of that detail. Let's take a look at that clipping warning by hitting the J key again. And that's a little bit better. And then I might darken down those blacks, make them a little bit more rich right about there. Now we can hit the J key again to turn off those clipping warnings. And we've really gone a long way towards making this image look amazing. You can also work with your smart contrast, and that's going to add just that extra little pop and dimension to an image, give it that finishing touch. Now, one last thing I want to do to this image is add a big soft vignette. And that's not really one of my black and white tools necessarily. The three that I love are going to be structure, super contrast, and the light tool. Those three are critical in addition to obviously converting it to black and white. And that's really where the meat of creating this high contrast, beautiful and dynamic black and white comes from. The vignette's just kind of a finishing touch that I add to almost every color or black and white image. I'll pull that amount slider down nice and far. Leave the size alone. We'll go into our advanced settings. We'll pull the feather up very high. That gives us a nice smooth transition between the dark and light areas. And for this image, I think I will add a little bit of inner light, just a touch, and then go back to that amount slider and back that off and just kind of wiggle this slider back and forth until I get it exactly where I want it. And I think right about there looks amazing. And now we can take a look at our overall before and after. It really is amazing how well you can create a dynamic and high contrast black and white with Luminar AI. So just to kind of recap, the three tools that I would absolutely recommend trying on your black and whites are going to be the structure tool. Go down to the bottom, check out super contrast. It also works great on color images, but I love it for black and white. And then fine tune those highlights and shadows, whites and blacks here in the light tool. I hope that helps you and you guys get some great black and white images that you can work with and really make pop. I want to let you guys know that on Thursday and Friday this week, we will not be having coffee break. Thursday is a holiday here in the US, and Friday we're taking the day off. So I hope you guys enjoy your week. Vinelli will be with you tomorrow. If you enjoyed this session, make sure you give us a thumbs up here on YouTube. Our producers love seeing that. And if you have any questions, make sure you pop those into the comments below, and I'll get those questions answered for you. All right, Pat has a question here. What does smart contrast do when you've already done the super contrast? That's a great question. So smart contrast is actually one of our AI tools, and it's kind of hidden. We've had it for a really long time, so it doesn't have that little AI label, but it looks at the areas that need contrast the most and adjusts accordingly. With super contrast, on the other hand, you have full control. There's not really any AI technology going on here. It's going to be taking into account your highlights as a whole, your midtones as a whole, and your shadows as a whole. So you have more technical control here. Smart contrast is kind of like structure AI. It's going to affect the areas that need the extra contrast the most and do that for you. So you can certainly try smart contrast first, then go to super contrast if you need it. But I like to use super contrast first personally, and then go up to the light tool just for any little finishing touches. All right, With that, I want to wish you guys a great rest of your day. Thanks for spending some time with me, and I hope you enjoyed this session. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.